MDE's Water and Science Administration. I am here today with Ray Barr, the Deputy Program Manager, Amanda Malcolm, the Division Chief for our Plan Review Division, Debbie Capacity, the Division Chief for our Program Review Division, and Michelle Crawford from the Program Review Division. We have 2 hours for this session. Looks like we have about almost 50 people in attendance. We may be seeing some join in as we're moving along. So let's go over today's agenda. First, we're going to discuss some housekeeping items. I will then take 20 minutes to provide a brief overview of the advanced notice for proposed rulemaking process and a brief overview of the proposed regulation changes. And then we are going to open it up for the audience for a 95-minute comment and question session. Finally, we're going to wrap up the session and talk about next steps. So for the housekeeping items, today's session is being recorded, as I said. The recording will be posted on MDE's website along with the slide presentation. I'm going to have one of our co-hosts, put that web address in our Q&A function a little bit later on in the session. Your microphones and cameras have been disabled due to the large number of attendees. We do ask you to please use the Q&A function to post your comments or questions. If you go down to the bottom left corner of your screen, you should see 9 dots. And if you click there, you will find the Q&A tab. The chat function has been disabled for this session. If time allows, at the end of the session, there will be an opportunity to raise your hand, and once you're called on, you can make a comment verbally, and we'll have those comments recorded as well. Okay, so let's see. One other thing I think I wanted to say. I do want to point out that today's session is intended to be a listening session. MDE's role today is to present the information and to listen to your feedback. With the exception of some very straightforward process questions, MDE is not going to respond to questions or comments raised today in this session. However, please know that all comments and questions will be read out loud today during the session, and MDE will consider all of your comments and all of your questions as we go through the finalization process of the draft regulations in the design manual. Now let me start the brief overview of the advanced notice of proposed rulemaking process. We call this the ANPRM process. You might have heard that term. This is an informal process. This is for MDE to receive comments and questions on the current proposed regulation changes and the design manual updates. And we would like to receive these comments prior to moving forward with a more formal regulation promulgation. So with this process, we've allowed a 90-day public comment period. It started September 19th, and it ends on December 19th, 2025. And we've created a special project email address that you can submit your comments to. It's shown here on the slide, and if I could ask one of our co-hosts to copy and paste that email address into the Q&A so you guys in attendance can copy it and paste it into your Google document or whatever you have available. We do have 3 listening sessions planned for this ANPRM process. 2 of them are virtual, 1 is in person. All of them are scheduled for 2 hours. MDE is planning to present the same material in each one of these sessions. So if you attend one, there's no reason for you to attend the other 2. They all will be recorded. So you can go to the recordings to hear the comments or questions that were raised. Of course, you can attend all 3 if you wish. The links to the virtual sessions are on MDE Stormwater webpage, And the registration link for the in-person session is also on MDE's Stormwater webpage. I will have somebody post that webpage address later on in this session. I do want to point out that you need to register for the in-person session by November 7th. So go to our webpage, you'll see the links, you'll see the recordings, the slide presentations, and information about registering for the in-person session. Now, we are interested in hearing from you, of course. We welcome both comments and questions. There are a few things that we are in particular interested in hearing from you on, and they include your opinion or comments on our proposed design storms and whether they appropriately reflect regional differences in rainfall and storm intensity across the state. We are interested in hearing from you on whether these proposed design storms provide adequate protection while also remaining feasible to implement. We're interested in hearing your opinion on the proposed stormwater management criteria and the criteria for BMP design, and whether these criteria combined strike the right balance between water quality, groundwater recharge, channel protection, and flood management. And in particular, we're also interested in hearing your thoughts on the proposed effective date of the new standards and the timelines that we propose for transitioning of vested projects and local ordinance updates. And then any information that you have that you can provide us on training that you're looking for or that you think you need, or any additional state support. So for some background on the stormwater management requirements in Maryland. Maryland Stormwater Law is found at the Annotated Code of Maryland, Environment Article, Section 4-201. And the regulations can be found at the Code of Maryland Regulations, Title 26, Subtitle 17, Chapter 2. Maryland Stormwater Management regulations are focused on managing the impacts of runoff from land development with a land disturbance of 5,000 square feet or more. The regulations and statute are in place to help reduce stream channel, the impacts of land development on stream channel erosion, minimize pollution in the stormwater runoff coming off land development projects, and minimize the impacts of land development projects to reduce flood risk from increases in runoff rates and volumes. These regulations require our approving authorities, those are our local jurisdictions, the counties, the municipalities. They require these approving authorities to enforce standards for stormwater practice design and construction, and also to implement programs for inspection, operation, and maintenance. And those standards, of course, are the standards that we're talking about today. Maryland Stormwater Management laws and regulations, well, the laws and regulations have been in place since the 1980s. The last major update to the regulations was in 2009, and that's more than 15 years ago. So I think it's safe to say that the current regulations and the Stormwater Design Manual are outdated, in particular due to our changing weather patterns and technological advancements. Maryland is experiencing an increase in the frequency and intensity of rainfall events, and the design storms that we currently use for regulating runoff are based on very old precipitation data. They use a very small data set, and therefore they're outdated and no longer protective. In addition, over the last 15 years, we've learned that the application of the current criteria is not consistent across the state, and that Maryland needs clearer standards for meeting environmental site design to the maximum extent practicable, and that it is critical that we ensure flood protection is provided consistently across the state for all regions. Over the past 3 years, MDE has engaged local governments, the development and building industry, universities, environmental groups, all to discuss needed updates to our current stormwater regulations and our design manual. This process has included conducting multiple meetings and technical workshops, all of which have been recorded and posted on a project website. We call that project Advancing Stormwater Resiliency in Maryland, or ASTORM. I have a link and a web address here on this slide to the ASTORM website. If I could ask one of our co-hosts to put that in the Q&A for the audience to have. Through this process over the last 3 years, we have developed 4 proposals on regulation updates, 3 of which were presented to a group of stakeholders that by law we are required to present to and get comments from. You can find a list of the stakeholder group, the group members, and the comments that we've received, and the 3 proposals on this same ASTORM website. This ANPRM process that we're talking about today, this proposal presents the 4th iteration of regulation updates and the first proposal of draft changes to our Stormwater Management Design Manual. Okay, there are 5 key elements of the proposed regulation updates. I'm going to go through these 5, and then I'm going to use the next 4 slides to do this. The first is updated design storms using updated precipitation data. And this data is important to reflect more current weather patterns and future climate change predictions. So let's look at the water quality design storm. In Maryland, stormwater BMPs that are used for water quality treatment are designed to capture 90% of the average annual runoff volume generated by the impervious areas of a development site. And because rainfall equals runoff for impervious surfaces, Maryland uses the 90th percent average annual rainfall as the design storm for capturing runoff. The updated precipitation data. What we've done is the average annual rainfall has been updated using this updated precipitation data, rainfall data collected between 1980 through 2023 by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, otherwise known as NOAA. NOAA has analyzed data from 44 weather stations in Maryland, and each of these stations have at least 10 years and some 40 years, up to 40 years of rainfall data collected through 2023. NOAA's updated analysis has created 2 regional precipitation values that MDE proposes to use for managing water quality. The figure on this slide here shows the areas of the 2 different regions. For the Western Maryland region, including Garrett County, Allegheny County, and Washington County, the water quality design storm is proposed to be 1 inch of rainfall. For the rest of the state, we call it the Central Eastern Rainfall Zone or region. The water quality design storm is proposed to be 1.5 inches of rainfall. MDE also proposes to update the design storms for channel protection criteria, overbank flood protection criteria, and extreme flood protection criteria. These updated storms are based on a larger and more current set of rainfall data than we currently use. Each of these design storms are proposed to be based on NOAA's Atlas 14, using a county average value plus a climate change factor. NOAA Atlas 14 provides hydrologic, intensity, duration, frequency data to help us understand how rainfall intensities, frequencies, and storm duration affect the amount and rate of runoff. NOAA's Atlas 14 incorporates data up through the year 2020. The climate change factors that MDE proposes to use are based on county mean climate change projections out to the year 2100 for what is called a high emissions scenario. These climate change projections are from the projected intensity, duration, frequency curve data tool for the Chesapeake Bay watershed that has been created by the Mid-Atlantic Regional Integrated Sciences and Assessment, otherwise known as MRISA. I put a link here on this slide to the MRISA IDF tool that we are using to develop the climate change factors. You can also go to this website here and find out background information about how this IDF curve data was generated. And I'm going to ask a co-host if you will please put a copy of this website address in the Q&A for the audience to use. You can also go to our A-Storm website, the website we posted earlier, to review past presentations to our stakeholder groups on precipitation, stormwater runoff, and the use of the MRISA tool. Those past presentations can provide some background into how we got to where we are today regarding precipitation and updated design storms. Okay, the second key element of the proposed regulation updates. MDE proposes to reinstate the requirement for overbank flood control statewide. This means that the 10-year quantity management requirement will now be required for all new development across the state. With this requirement, in addition, the definition of what it means to manage the risk of overbank flooding is also proposed to be updated. MDE has proposed to require that for QP10 or overbank flood protection, the post-development discharge rate for the 10-year 24-hour storm is based on future climate change projections using a climate change factor, and that this post-development discharge rate must be managed to pre-development conditions determined without a climate change factor. The third key element of the proposed regulation updates is to clarify what is meant by ESD to the MEP, or meeting the ESD to the MEP standard. This is to ensure that it is clear and consistently applied across the state. So MDE proposes that to meet the ESD to the MEP standard, a project will be required to manage the full water quality volume in an environmental site design practice, an ESD practice. In addition, the channel protection volume must be managed in either an ESD practice or a structural practice, depending on the required channel protection volume for the discharge point for the development site that we are looking at. So when the requirement for the discharge point is less than or equal to 8,000 cubic feet for channel protection volume, then that channel protection volume must be managed in an ESD practice. Where the requirement for the discharge point for the development site is greater than 8,000 cubic feet, the channel protection volume must be managed in a structural practice. The last two key elements are the result of the first three. As a result of the proposed updated design storms and quantity management requirements, Maryland will see an increase in the amount of stormwater runoff that must be managed in green ESD practices in some portions of the state, and that would be the eastern and central Maryland portions of the state. In addition, the updated channel protection volume and flood risk protection design storms and the updates to what is meant to meet the ESD to the MEP standard will both help to ensure that larger, more intense storms are consistently managed by our most resilient BMPs. Now, finally, the proposed update also includes some significant updates to Maryland's Stormwater Management Design Manual. The Maryland Stormwater Management Design Manual is incorporated into the regulations by reference. Therefore, any updates to the regulations must be reflected in the Stormwater Design Manual. Proposed updates to the design manual include, of course, ensuring consistency with the regulations. That's the biggest update, and that is an update that has occurred throughout the manual. We have also proposed to remove obsolete or outdated criteria and appendices, including the criteria and appendices that are referenced from other state agencies. We have combined all BMPs into one chapter. We have consolidated many of the duplicative practices. We have, or we are planning to update BMP figures to match the new criteria and to correct some existing errors and provide additional information. We are planning to update the design examples to meet the new criteria, and we've moved the construction inspection, and maintenance criteria to an appendix. If you've gone through the drafts that are up on our website for review, you'll see that there are still some things that are under development that we plan to do prior to going through a formal regulation update process. MDE is still working on a few key components of the updated design manual, and this includes updating appendices. I've listed here, I'm not going to read them all, but I've listed here the appendices that we're planning to update. If it's not listed here, we're most likely not going to include it. It's probably information that you could find on another agency's website, and we would reference that instead of having a appendix for that information. So updating the appendices, we're working on that. Updating BMP figures, we're in the process of working on that as well. That's a significant amount of work. Updating the design examples, of course, to meet the new criteria. Once comments are received and reviewed as part of this process that we're currently under, the ANPRM process, MDE is going to tackle the next updates, and that includes updates to our model ordinance, updates to the standard plans to match the new criteria, and then recreating additional technical guidance and training that I'm sure will be needed as we move through this process. Okay, so what happens after this process is over? We intend to collect and review all the comments that we've received, questions that we received through the listening sessions, and those that have been submitted or will be submitted through the email address that we provided at the beginning of this session. We'll review those and make any necessary changes and updates to the regulations and design manual, proposed regulations and design manual. We will then go through the official proposed rulemaking process. This is when the proposed rulemaking, it's called a proposed rulemaking, the draft regulations and design manual are put out for an official public comment period. We anticipate being done in the early summer of 2026. There will be a 30-day formal comment period during this process. Assuming the comments that we received during the 30-day formal comment period are not significant and significant changes are not required, we would then go through the final rulemaking process early fall 2026. I believe it's, I'm going to say 2 weeks. I might be wrong, but 2 weeks after posting final rulemaking, I believe we adopt the regulations. Okay. That's the end of the overview session, or overview part of the session. Now we're going to open up for comments and questions. And I'm going to read over some of these rules again for us. This is a listening session, primarily to get input from you that MDE will consider as we refine the proposed regulations and the design manual. And we want to hear from you. This is really your comments, your thoughts, your concerns, your ideas, your questions are very important to us. We know that you will help make this process, this document, these regulations better. So please use this time to make comments and ask questions. Please place your comments and questions in the Q&A function. As I said earlier, we will read each question or comment out loud as they've come in the order that they were received. Again, if time allows at the end of the session, there will be an opportunity for you to raise your hand and we will call on you to see if you would like to make a comment verbally. I'm going to try to respond to questions about process during this session. However, technical questions, technical comments will be we're not going to respond to those, but they will be considered as we move forward with the regulatory process. I also want to recommend, to ensure that we have a full record of your question or comment, we suggest that you follow up after the session with a written submission to the email address shown here on the slide, and I think it was earlier posted in the Q&A.